Imagine standing barefoot on a blood-soaked plain, completely surrounded by the greatest military empire the world had ever seen. You are outnumbered. You are outarmed. And they have come to destroy everything you love. This is not a movie. This is September 490 BC. And the survival of Western civilization hangs by a thread. 600 Persian warships have just appeared on the Greek horizon, carrying 25,000 battle-hardened soldiers hungry for revenge. Their emperor, Darius the Great, has already personally sworn by the gods to burn Athens to the ground and drag its people into chains. In fact, Herodotus tells us Darius had a servant whisper into his ear 3 times every single night at dinner, "Master, remember the Athenians." That is not politics. That is obsession. That is the consuming fury of a god-king who refuses to be defied by a small, stubborn city. Athens had committed an unforgivable sin. Years earlier, it helped Greek rebels in Ionia burn the Persian city of Sardis, humiliating Darius before his entire empire. Now the bill had come due, and the Persians were about to collect in the most brutal currency imaginable: blood, fire, and slavery. Before landing at Marathon, the Persian fleet had already obliterated the Greek city of Eretria, looting its temples and burning everything in sight. The Eretrians who survived were captured and shipped east as slaves, an example Darius intended to repeat on Athens within days. The Persians chose Marathon deliberately. The coastal plain was flat, open, and perfect for their cavalry. 25,000 horsemen and archers, designed to crush anything in their path. Their strategy was simple and terrifying. Rain 10,000 arrows into the enemy ranks, then charge with cavalry and finish what was left with swords. Athens had no cavalry to speak of, no archers in meaningful numbers. What it had was 10,000 citizen soldiers, farmers and potters and merchants, clad in 50 pounds of bronze armor each. These men were called hoplites, heavy infantry, who had trained to fight in tight formation, shoulder to shoulder, spear to spear, in a wall of bronze called the phalanx. They also had 1,000 warriors from the small city of Plataea, the only Greek allies willing to stand beside Athens in its darkest hour. Athens had desperately sent its greatest long-distance runner, Phidippides, all the way to Sparta, nearly 150 miles, begging for help. The Spartans, the fiercest warriors in all of Greece, refused. They were locked in a sacred, religious festival and said they could not march until it ended. So Athens stood alone, 10,000 men against 25,000. A tiny democracy against the mightiest empire on earth. The Athenian generals were split almost perfectly between 2 choices: retreat to the city walls, or march out and face the Persians head-on. The deciding vote fell to a civil official named Callimachus, who broke the deadlock by choosing attack. That single decision would change the history of the world. Command was given to a general named Miltiades, a man who had actually lived inside the Persian Empire and understood their tactics more deeply than any other Athenian alive. Miltiades had one weapon no Persian general expected: knowledge of their enemy's greatest weakness. He knew the Persians always placed their best warriors, their elite immortals and Sakai fighters, directly in the center of the battle line. His plan was radical, almost suicidal. He would deliberately weaken his own center to only 4 men deep, while making his flanks 8 or more men deep. He wanted the Persians to smash through the middle, because the moment they did, his powerful wings would curl inward like a trap snapping shut. On the morning of the battle, the Greeks did something no army had done before in hoplite warfare. They charged, not a slow, measured march, a full sprint. Thousands of bronze-armored men, running across open ground directly at the Persian archers, eating the distance before arrows could find them. The Persians watching from their lines thought the Greeks had gone mad. Herodotus records they called it an army of madmen rushing to their own destruction. But the Greeks knew exactly what they were doing. Every second of sprinting was a second fewer of standing still while Persian archers turned them into pincushions. When the 2 armies collided, the sound was catastrophic: a wall of bronze shields, crashing against thousands of men. An earthquake of iron and bone. Hoplite warfare was not glamorous. Oxford historian Victor Davis Hanson describes ancient phalanx combat as something closer to a rugby scrum than a sword duel. Men pushed chest to chest, stabbing short spears into necks and groins. breathing each other's last breaths, slipping in blood and viscera under their sandals. Inside a Greek helmet, the heat was unbearable. Soldiers could barely see. They could barely breathe. Many urinated inside their armor from pure terror. The Persian center, with its elite warriors, tore straight through the deliberately thin Greek middle exactly as Miltiades predicted. For a terrible moment, it looked like disaster. The Persian best troops were pouring through the Greek line, pushing toward the rear, ready to roll the whole battle. But then the Greek wing struck. Miltiades ordered his powerful flanks to turn inward, pivoting like two arms reaching around to embrace the Persian center from behind. Suddenly, the Persians who had broken through found themselves surrounded on three sides by furious hoplites with nowhere to run. What happened next was less a battle and more a systematic slaughter. The Persians, built to fight in open order with bows and cavalry, were helpless inside the grinding press of the phalanx. Their archers tried to defend themselves with short daggers when the Greeks closed in, but bronze Greek armor versus a dagger was not a fight, it was an execution. The Persian wings collapsed first. Then the retreating soldiers ran for their ships on the beach, desperate to reach safety before the Greeks reached them. But the great marsh of Marathon lay directly between the panicked Persian troops and their fleet. What was meant to protect their flank became a trap. Hundreds of Persians plunged into the marsh, sinking under the weight of their gear, screaming as hoplites drove spears into their backs. The beach itself became a slaughterhouse. The Greeks chased the Persians all the way to the ships, fighting hand-to-hand in the surf to prevent them from escaping. Athenian soldier Cynaegirus, brother of the playwright Aeschylus, grabbed the stern of a Persian ship with his bare hands, refusing to let it escape. A Persian warrior raised an axe and severed Cynaegirus's arm at the wrist. He grabbed the ship with his other hand. The axe fell again. He died still trying to hold it. By the time the slaughter ended, the numbers were almost incomprehensible in their asymmetry. The Persians had lost approximately 6,400 men. The Athenians and Plataeans had lost just 192 soldiers, a casualty ratio so lopsided that historians still argue over whether Herodotus recorded it correctly. The Greeks captured 7 Persian warships outright. The rest of the fleet escaped, but Miltiades knew the nightmare was not over yet. The Persian Admiral Darius immediately sailed his fleet around the southern Cape of Attica, heading directly for Athens, which lay completely undefended. Miltiades ordered his exhausted men to do something extraordinary. March. Now, 26 miles back to Athens, in full bronze armor, after fighting the battle of their lives. They ran, walked, and limped through the night. When the Persian fleet arrived off the harbor of Athens the next morning, the Greek army was already there, waiting on the high ground. Darius stared at the shoreline, saw the men who should have been dead, and turned his fleet around. He sailed back to Persia and never returned. Back at Marathon, the Greeks buried their 192 dead on the battlefield itself, breaking all tradition, honoring them as heroes too sacred to move. That burial mound, the Soros, still stands today. You can visit it. You can stand on the same ground where farmers and merchants held back an empire. And then there was Phidippaides. According to legend, he ran the 26 miles from Marathon to Athens to announce the victory, gasped the words, "We have won," and fell dead. That run, that final sacrifice, became the Marathon race, first run at the 1896 Athens Olympics, still run by millions around the world today. The great playwright Aeschylus, himself a veteran of Marathon, was buried decades later with an epitaph that made no mention of his art or his fame. It said only that he had fought at Marathon and that the long-haired Persians knew his valor well. That was enough. That was everything. The Battle of Marathon was the first time any Greek army had ever defeated the Persian Empire in open battle, and it shattered the myth that Persia was unstoppable. It saved Athenian democracy at the exact moment it was young enough to be crushed, giving it the decades it needed to grow into something the world had never seen. The men who fought at Marathon, those 10,000 ordinary citizens in bronze, did not just win a battle. They changed what it meant to be free, and they did it on a plain by the sea, on a September morning, against impossible odds, armed with nothing but discipline, genius, and the desperate courage of men who had nothing left to lose. The Persian Empire would try again. Xerxes would come with 1,000,000 men. Thermopylae would burn. Athens itself would be sacked. But Marathon had already proven something that could never be unproven. That free men, fighting for their own city, their own children, their own laws, could break any empire on earth. Remember that the next time someone tells you the odds are impossible,